Greetings, this is Groove Ruby with part 10 of my series I'm calling Foundation's Progress, the story of Isaac Asimov's writing of the Foundation series. So this continues with Foundation and Earth. They had been intended as a follow-up to Foundation's Edge, as indicated by a loose end he intentionally left at its conclusion. And yet there is one thing I have to confess to you: I generally manage to tie up all the loose ends into one neat little bow knot at the end of my stories, no matter how complicated the plot might be. In this case, however, I noticed that when all was all done, one glaring little item remained unresolved. I am hoping no one notices, because it clearly points the way to the continuation of the series. It is even possible that I inadvertently gave this away, for at the end of the novel I wrote "the end" for now. I very much fear that if the novel proves successful, Doubleday will be at my throat again, as Campbell used to be in the old days. And yet, what can I do but hope that the novel is very successful indeed? What a quandary. A standalone editorial, published in Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine, along with an installment of Forward the Foundation, about the Foundation, continues thus. But apparently, Doubleday felt that they had done enough for me and that they wanted another Foundation book and to hurry up with it. So I wrote Foundation and Earth. Not all that bad, but I ended with a device that left me unable to finish it. To this day, I have never finished the book. With the conclusion of Foundation and Earth, Dr. Asimov had once again written himself into a corner. Only this time, Fred Pohl no longer taking his walks with him on the Brooklyn Bridge and giving helpful advice. He went to his grave without continuing it any further, even in a draft. In the chronology of the Foundation universe, the series ends right there on a rather sour note. For this reason, though sales were certainly strong enough to justify its publication, reviewers have consistently found this book to be less of an installment than the others, and probably the weakest of the whole series. It essentially had become something of a "where are they now," meaning the time of Golan Trevize, accounting of the state of the worlds previously mentioned in both the Robot and Foundation novels, now that the two had been finally woven together into something of a single narrative. But the series was not yet done being written. What he had done for Marty Greenberg in circling back to the past instead of pushing it further into the future, he could do again. It started thus. Well, the next thing that happened was the fact that I met a young man in the elevator of my apartment building. He said, "Dr. Asimov, why don't you write a book about Hari Seldon when he was a young man?" I laughed and said, "I don't know what Hari Seldon was doing when he was a young man." He said, "Well, make it up." That got me thinking, why couldn't I make it up? So I went ahead and wrote Prelude to Foundation, in which Hari Seldon was 32 years old. Frankly, I think that this is the best Foundation book I ever wrote. Prelude to Foundation does get strong reviews, and amply demonstrated that the old master still had it in to write great Foundation stories. It also provided us with the first glimpse of the inner workings and psychology of Hari Seldon the man, as the previous glimpses of him, written back in 1941 and 1951, presented him purely from the outside. The handling of incorporating the robots, both as remembered by the descendants of the Aurorans and by the presence of R. Daniel Olivow, was particularly smooth and a truly compelling plot point. He probably had never had so much actual fun writing a Foundation book since he wrote The Mule. But having given the origins of Hari Seldon the man its due, it was now time to return to something of his own roots. The editorial concludes. The original Foundation stories appeared in a magazine and came out in different lengths. Martin Greenberg decided to put them together in 3 books, and in the 3 books they appeared in different lengths and with different people. On the other hand, when I wrote Foundation's Edge, Foundation and Earth, and Prelude to Foundation, I wrote them as single books, and, as a matter of fact, they didn't take up much in the way of events. The heroes of each story fought their way through. Well then, Jennifer thought it would be a good idea if I wrote a Foundation book in which the characters were new from one section to another. I thought the matter through and decided that I would write a Foundation book called Forward the Foundation, in which Hari Seldon gradually grew older. I would tell it in 5 installments, and in each installment Hari was 10 years older. I began work on it, but then toward the end of 1989, disaster struck. I came down with congestive heart failure produced by mitral valve insufficiency. It was subsequently revealed that he had caught AIDS from a tainted blood transfusion. I was very sick, and I was hospitalized for a month. Actually, I was convinced I was going to die, but I didn't. In fact, I said to my doctor, little Paul Esserman Paul, I said, I think I'm going to die, and I want you to let me die in peace. And he said, I don't think you're going to die, and I'm not going to let you die in peace. And he didn't, and I'm still here. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. I'm tired. I'm just plain tired. I sleep a great deal, and I drag around even when I'm not asleep. As an example, writing this essay means doing a page or two and then lying down to rest a bit. What's more, I find it is difficult to walk, and I have to use a cane, which is embarrassing. And the worst trouble is that I can't write very much. This is especially true of the new Foundation book. I wrote the first installment, in fact it was published last November in this magazine, and the second and third parts are finished as well. The fourth part is almost finished, but it's been weeks and weeks since I've been able to work on it, nor do I know when I'll be able to get to it. Every time I try, I find I'm too tired to work at it. Whether I will improve with time, I can't say. Certainly there seems to be no sign of it at the moment. Believe me, I am sorry about this, more so than you can possibly be. So, once again, writing had become painful, though in this case not due to the story problems and constraints, but his failing health. This would be his very last writing project, his last book, and one that he did not finish. The first 3 installments were published in Isaac Asimov Science Fiction magazine in November 1991, April 1992, and April 1993 issues titled Forward the Foundation, Cleon the Emperor, and The Consort. But the fourth, given some touch-up by Janet Asimov, plus a short epilogue, appeared only in the book Forward the Foundation. Forward the Foundation appeared as Ito Demerzal, Cleon the Emperor appeared as Cleon I, The Consort appeared as Doris Benevolini. A fourth section, not serialized, appears as Wanda Selden. As could be seen from the account above, however, a fifth installment had also been intended. Following the pattern Hari Seldon being 32 in the events of Prelude Foundation, 40 in the first part as Ito Demerzal, 50 in the second part as Cleon I, 60 in the third part as Doris Benevolini, and 70 in Wanda Selden, one can reasonably expect that he would have been 80 in that intended but never drafted fifth and final installment. And given the clear precedent of naming each of the sections after someone who dies or leaves at the conclusion of each, it would probably have been named Hari Seldon. I feel reasonably certain that the epilogue would have even more easily fit at the end of the fifth installment than it does after the fourth, as it has him clutching the prime radiant with his stiff dead fingers. The intended fifth section would have put him in the same time frame as the events of the psychohistorians of the first Foundation volume, and might presumably have featured some of the same events, this time from its own perspective instead of that of Gal Dornick and the others. Doubtless other intrigues going on in the background would have been the centerpiece of the installment, and that would certainly have been when he launches Forward the Foundation, hence the title of the book. But alas, whatever sketchy ideas he might have had in mind for that went to the grave with him. In 1996, a Retro Hugo Award for Best Novella was awarded to Asimov's The Mule, published in 1945, but as if awarded in 1946. Roughly concurrent with the beginning of Forward the Foundation, a great many of his science fiction writer friends contributed to a Festschrift volume honoring Dr. Asimov, especially his fiction writing, which was to be titled Foundation's Friends and published in 1989, to commemorate 50 years of his being a professional and published writer. The book consists mostly of Asimov pastiches, spoofs, a few remembrances, and an entry from Dr. Asimov himself titled 50 Years. 3 of these stories directly expand the Foundation universe. Trantor Falls by Harry Turtledove, which reads like any one of the installments contained in the original series, but tells the story of the sacking of Trantor, the ruthlessness of Gilmer, and most of all the preservation of the Imperial Library by the students in the Second Foundation, capturing fully the tone and atmosphere of the original series, and fits in flawlessly with the whole Foundation mythos. It's not only good, but recognized by all as canon, even though it was not written by Isaac Asimov. Foundation's Constance by George Zebrowski, a rather short and weak entry, most notable for its reasonable attempt at portraying Hari Seldon's final appearance in the Time Vault at the end of the 1,000 years leading up to the establishment of the Second Empire, and The Originist by Orson Scott Card, which tells the story of one Lael Forska, who seeks membership in the Foundation, but is rebuffed by Hari Seldon in his last days and denied passage to Terminus for a deeper and far more fulfilling purpose. This is also quite good, though a bit longer and wordy and somewhat predictable, but also generally recognized as canon. The volume also features some stories about positronic robots and Susan Calvin. After his death, the Asimov Estate granted permission for Foundation's Friends to be revised and updated to include more remembrances, published in 1997 now that he was dead, and for another Foundation trilogy to be written, which would make its appearance as Foundation Sphere by Gregory Benford later on in 1997, Foundation and Chaos by Greg Bear in 1998, and Foundation's Triumph by David Brin in 1999. Foundation Sphere by Gregory Benford picks up where the section in Forward the Foundation titled Ito Demerzel leaves off. Immediately after the departure of Ito Demerzel as Emperor Cleon's first minister and the story of Hari Seldon's acceptance of the office, this volume introduces TikTok, a kind of menial robot briefly in vogue on Trantor and throughout much of the Empire and about that time period. The voices of ancient beings in the galaxy who were apparently wiped out during human expansion into the galaxy before humanity even had a chance to know of them, a secretly revived Doors Benedluid, hints of robot schisms and vestigial remnant groups of various robot factions at variance with R. Daniels Olivau's zeroth law approach, human mind-controlled avatar-type pans, chimpanzees, chaos worlds, whenever some renaissance of non-conservative thought comes along, and some sort of electronically resurrected restored personality simulations, sims, of ancient Earth figures, namely St. Joan of Arc and Voltaire of France, which last received considerable attention far in excess of their value or relevance to the story. Foundation and Chaos by Greg Bear provides a full novelization of what might have been the fifth part of Before the Foundation, filling the holes in that book predictably but well and progressing further with the new characters and situations and intrigues introduced in Foundation Sphere. As one would expect, the arrival of Galgornik and the trial of Hari Seldon, by which the nearly 100,000 encyclopedists who had exiled the Terminus are indeed portrayed from Hari Seldon's perspective, and in the greater context of the various other intrigues going on in the background. And we get to know Lin Chen a whole lot better. We are also introduced to Baraliso and Clea Asgard, two mentalics whose natural born abilities lead one to being a prototypical mule and the other becoming the beginning of the Gaia project. The creation of Gaia truly becomes a product of Daniel Olivau's doing. Hari Seldon records his holographic simulacrum messages to the First Foundation, officially concluding his role in founding the Foundations. Foundation's Triumph by David Brin picks up directly after the close of Foundation and Chaos. It turns out that Hari Seldon does have yet something more to contribute, as he dashes off on some adventure to explore patterns in soil samples drawn from the inhabited planets of currents of space, correlating these things to anomalous events that his psychohistoric equations could not account for, and ultimately discovering yet further facts about the history of the galaxy, the nature of the chaos worlds, details of the robot schisms, and so many other things, that even his equations can be refined somewhat substantially. It really does seem to emerge that the Seldon plan is merely meant by Daniel to be merely a stopgap to carry on until Gaia can be developed and approved by the man who is always right. But there is also good reason to hope that the Foundations will also persist and carry through to the Second Empire, as evidenced by the publication of the 116th and now 117th editions of the Encyclopedia Galactica quoted throughout the book series. David Brin also wrote a short follow-up posted online entitled Denouement, which confirms that Doors did visit Hari Seldon at the time of his death. And that concludes what I have to say about the Foundations story. Thank you very much.